Welcome, dear friends, to another peaceful journey through history. Tonight, we drift far away from the noise of the modern world and step softly into the ancient past, a place where calm was not a luxury, but a natural part of life. Together, we'll explore how early civilizations found rest in warm lamps, gentle herbs, shared stories, temple chants, slow breathing, and the rhythms of nature itself. Thank you for being here. And if you enjoy these quiet journeys through forgotten worlds, feel free to subscribe and join our growing family of calm seekers. It truly helps this channel continue creating peaceful stories like this one. Settle in, breathe slowly, and allow your mind to loosen. As this spoken story comes to an end, soothing, relaxing music will begin, guiding you even deeper into rest. Now, let us begin. The day had finally ended, yet the familiar strain of modern life lingered in the air. Even in the late hours, the world did not truly settle. Streets still glowed with artificial light, phones buzzed with unfinished conversations, and thoughts ran in circles long after work was done. People felt tired, but their minds remained alert in a way that made rest difficult. In the present era, stress no longer came from physical hardship or survival challenges. It came from speed-fast communication, fast expectations, fast decisions, and in that speed, the human mind struggled to slow down. He observed this pattern everywhere. Someone might sit down intending to relax, only for their mind to return to a task left incomplete. Another might lie in bed, eyes closed, but thoughts continued to move rapidly through worries and responsibilities. This was the world many lived in, a place full of opportunity but lacking natural pauses. People tried to rest without the environment that supported rest. Yet, in this restless landscape, an interesting idea kept resurfacing. It was simple but powerful. The human mind had not changed as quickly as the world around it. While technology advanced and routines shifted, the deep rhythms of the body remained tied to older ways of living. This realization often led people to look backward, toward times when life moved more slowly and evenings carried a sense of natural closure. He found himself wondering whether ancient civilizations understood something that had been overlooked. These civilizations faced challenges, famine, weather, illness, but they also lived within structures that encouraged stillness at the end of the day. Nighttime was respected, transitions were gradual, and rest was treated as a critical part of well-being. It wasn't measured or optimized. It simply existed as a natural part of life. This contrast between the present and the past formed the foundation for the journey ahead. Instead of imagining ancient worlds as dramatic or mystical, he considered them in their practical, everyday form. What did people do after a long day? How did they calm their minds? What habits helped them drift to sleep without the persistent tension modern society had normalized? As he reflected, he pictured the listener stepping into this story gradually, not by force, but by curiosity. The listener might recognize their own fatigue, the kind that settles in the back of the mind, persisting even during moments meant for rest. They might acknowledge how often they tried to quiet their thoughts only to find new distractions replacing the old. This recognition created a simple starting point. Modern stress was real, but solutions did not always need to be modern. He imagined guiding the listener back in time, gently and without urgency. They would not leap directly into a dramatic ancient scene. Instead, they would begin with a grounding thought. Humans have always needed calm. They have always searched for ways to ease worry, soften tension, and prepare for sleep. Ancient worlds might appear distant, but their concerns were surprisingly familiar. With this in mind, the journey would explore how early civilizations responded to the universal need for peace. Each chapter would reveal small practices, herbal brews, warm baths, rhythmic breathing, communal winds down that shaped nightly routines. These were not complicated rituals. They were simple behaviors based on observation and consistency. Over generations, they transformed into systems of healing. Before stepping into the past, he allowed the present moment to settle more clearly. In the modern world, nights were often dominated by screens, deadlines, and even leisure spaces were filled with information. People were expected to stay reachable, updated, and efficient. Rest became something they had to fit in, rather than something that arrived naturally. This constant activity left little room for the mind to transition into slower states. He considered how ancient practices might offer a counterbalance, not as nostalgic escape, but as gentle reminders of what the human brain responds to. Dim light, predictable routines, warm sensations, steady sounds, and intentional winding down were all deeply rooted in history. These elements signaled safety, which in turn allowed the body to relax. This chapter served as an introduction to that idea. It suggested that by exploring the ways ancient cultures approached nighttime, one might uncover insights that remain timeless. These insights were not about copying the past, but about learning from its rhythm. If early civilizations understood the importance of gradual transitions and environmental cues, perhaps modern individuals could benefit from adopting similar patterns. He imagined the listener beginning to feel a subtle shift as the chapter unfolded. Not a dramatic transformation, but a gentle acknowledgement that rest required preparation. The listener might notice how rarely they gave themselves permission to slow down. They might realize that peace did not come from sudden stillness, but from a steady reduction of pace. This understanding aligned closely with how ancient people moved through their evenings. With this thought, he prepared the path forward. The next chapter would explore the earliest civilizations, offering a look at how human beings first developed calming habits without formal instructions or written guides. These early communities relied on nature for warm shelter, shared spaces, and repeated routines to create a sense of security. Their lives revealed the roots of stress relief long before medicine or philosophy attempted to explain it. Returning to the present, he offered one final reflection. The world today often encourages individuals to seek complex solutions for simple problems, but the human mind has always been soothed by steady, sensory cues. Warmth, dimness, quiet, repetition. Ancient civilizations used these naturally. They did not strive to remove stress entirely. They instead created environments where the mind could release it at day's end. The chapter closed with an invitation. Rather than fighting restlessness with force, perhaps the listener could allow themselves to drift backward in time slowly, chapter by chapter. The past had no perfect answers, but it offered countless small practices that supported peace. And in rediscovering these practices, the listener might find that rest became easier, more natural, and less tied to the pressures of the modern world. Long before cities grew crowded and long before written medical systems appeared, early humans lived in small, simple settlements shaped by the rhythms of nature. Their tools were basic. Their homes were constructed from whatever materials the land provided, and their routines followed the rising and setting of the sun. In these early civilizations, stress existed but took a different form, tied closely to weather, food, availability, and safety. It was within this world, quiet, slow, and deeply connected to the land that humanity learned its earliest methods of calming the mind. He pictured one of these settlements at the edge of a forest, or perhaps along a riverbank. As daylight faded, shadows stretched across the ground, and families gathered near their shelters. There were no clocks to dictate when the day should end. People simply responded to the dimming sky, a natural signal that work was done. The gradual decline of light allowed the mind to ease itself out of activity without effort. This simple transition from day to night served as one of the earliest forms of emotional regulation. Inside these small homes, routines developed through repetition and necessity. Fire held a central place, not only for warmth, but also for calm. As the flames settled into steady, glowing embers, the atmosphere softened. The gentle heat relaxed tired muscles, and the crackle of burning wood created a consistent background sound. People instinctively gathered around the fire's center, using it as a place to unwind before sleep. Without knowing it, they were creating one of the earliest sensory anchors for relaxation. The world around them supported this calm. Night was far darker than modern listeners could easily imagine. There were no streetlights, no glowing signs, and no constant hum from distant machines. Instead, the soundscape consisted of natural elements, wind moving through leaves, the distant calls of animals, the soft rush of water if the settlement sat near a river. These sounds did not stimulate the mind. They grounded it, allowing thoughts to settle gradually. Even though their lives were challenging, early people developed ways to soothe themselves through nature. They used plants, not only for survival but for comfort. Leaves with pleasant scents were placed near sleeping areas. Roots that eased tension were brewed into simple drinks. Although these practices lacked formal study, They were passed down through trial and experience. Certain plants became associated with calm simply because families noticed they brought relief after a long day. He imagined a small family at the end of such a day. The adults had spent hours gathering food or tending to tasks, and the children had explored the surroundings, learning skills by observing their elders. As night approached, the family returned to the same familiar routines. Tools were set aside. The fire was tended. A simple meal was shared. These actions did not feel like rituals, but they laid the foundation for stability and comfort. Early humans also relied on touch as a natural stress reliever. A parent might place a calming hand on a child's back, or two adults might sit close for warmth. These small gestures helped the nervous system settle. Without formal language to describe mental states, people understood intuitively that closeness and physical warmth eased tension. Another important aspect of nightly.com was social connection. People rarely faced stress alone. In the small size of early communities, worries, challenges, and concerns were shared openly. Families spoke about the day's events, not a structured conversation, but a simple recounting. This sharing helped prevent worries from growing in isolation. Emotional strain was reduced not through technique, but through presence. He noted that these early communities did not try to escape the natural world, they moved with it. Their bodies responded to the temperature. Their minds adapted to the availability of light, and their routines aligned with seasonal changes. This alignment created a sense of predictability, and predictability reduced anxiety. Humans were not meant to deal with constant unpredictability. In early civilizations, stability came naturally through the environment. He also considered how early people understood sleep. Without artificial light, most slept in multiple segments. They drifted into the first sleep soon after sunset, woke briefly in the middle of the night, and returned to sleep until dawn. This pattern aligned with natural melatonin cycles and allowed the mind to rest steadily. During the waking period, people might sit quietly, stoke the fire, or speak softly. This break between sleep cycles gave them time to release lingering tension without rushing. These practices were not seen as health strategies. They were simply the structure of life. But from a modern perspective, they played essential roles in reducing stress. Slowness, routine, sensory grounding, and community connection formed the earliest framework for human emotional well-being. As he reflected on these ancient evenings, he realized how different they were from the habits of today. Modern life asked people to transition from bright screens to sleep in minutes. It asked them to move from high stimulation to quiet without a gradual slope. Early humans did not experience such abrupt changes. Their nights brought a steady descent from activity to calm. This chapter showed that the origins of stress relief were older than written history. They were not created in temples or philosophical schools. They began in small shelters, around fires that kept people warm, in conversations shared before sleep, and in the consistent routines that framed each day. Early civilizations created the first healing traditions simply by living according to nature's pace. He imagined the listener taking in these images: dim light, soft warmth, quiet voices, and the steady rhythm of a world without artificial interruptions. Perhaps the listener felt the contrast to their own evenings and understood the value of gradual slowing. The chapter did not romanticize the past. It simply highlighted how ancient environments supported calm in ways modern life often disrupts. As the chapter neared its end, he looked toward the next stage of the journey. The first major civilization known for documenting its healing methods in Shant. Egypt. There, remedies became more organized, and nightly calm transformed into a structured practice supported by healers, herbs, and temple traditions. But for now, the lesson remained simple. Before complex systems existed, humans listened to nature, followed steady routines, and relied on one another for tranquility. In that simplicity, they found rest. Night in ancient Egypt arrived in a way unlike anywhere else. As the heat of the sun finally released its grip, the desert cooled and the world became still. Homes made of mud bricks soft in the dim light, and the Nile reflected the sky like a long ribbon of dark glass. It was in this predictable quiet that Egyptians developed some of the most recognizable early practices for calming the mind and preparing the body for rest. He pictured a modest Egyptian household near the riverbanks. Families returned from their daily tasks, farmers from the fields, craftsmen from their workshops, and scribes from their careful writing. Their evenings were simple, yet structured. Lamps were lit, using wicks soaked in oil, creating a warm, steady glow that replaced the harsh sunlight. The transition from daylight to lamplight provided an immediate sense of calm, guiding the mind gently into evening. One of the defining features of Egyptian wellness was their use of herbs. Of all ancient civilizations, they documented their remedies with unusual detail. Among their calming plants, chamomile stood out. Egyptians valued its ability to soothe the body after a long day. When brewed into a warm infusion, it eased digestion and quieted restless thoughts. Its scent alone was enough to create a sense of comfort inside the home. Many families kept dried chamomile flowers stored in clay jars, ready to be brewed in the evenings. Another plant, valerian, was recognized for its relaxing effects. Although Egypt did not cultivate it widely, it arrived through trade from nearby regions. Healers used it sparingly, offering it to those who struggled with tension or sleeplessness. Even without modern scientific frameworks, Egyptians recognized that certain roots softened the mind's agitation. But among all plants, blue lotus held special significance. Unlike chamomile, which was valued for its simplicity, blue lotus carried symbolic and practical weight. It appeared in artwork, in temple ceremonies, and in the daily lives of those seeking mental ease. When steeped in water or gently heated, the flower released a mild, relaxing effect. Egyptians described it not in medical terms, but as something that opened the heart and encouraged peaceful thought. Families sometimes placed the petals in their homes to allow the scent to linger through the evening. He imagined a healer preparing such herbs inside a quiet room. The healer moved slowly, selecting ingredients from shelves lined with jars. Some herbs were crushed with a stone, others were left whole, and still others were soaked to release their aroma. These preparations were not hurried. Egyptians believed that the act of preparing a remedy was part of the remedy itself. Slowness allowed the mind to move away from the day's demands. Scent played an equally important role in Egyptian nighttime routines. Lavender, though more prominent in Greek and Roman culture, was known to Egyptians through trade. Its oil was used sparingly to scent clothing or bedding. More common aromas included frankincense and myrrh, both of which were burned in small quantities to create a subtle, comforting smoke. The smell filled the room with a sense of structure and ritual, clear indicators that night had arrived. These scents were not simply pleasant. They served as environmental cues, helping the body shift from activity to stillness. The Egyptians understood that familiar smells could guide the mind more effectively than spoken instruction. These nightly aromas became part of the household identity, recognized by every family member as a sign of rest. Temple practices also influenced how Egyptians approached nighttime.com. Priests treated dreams as meaningful, believing that sleep provided a connection to deeper understanding. To prepare for sleep, priests sometimes encouraged quiet reflection, soft chanting or breathing exercises long before such practices were described formally. These traditions blended spiritual belief with emotional regulation, creating a well-rounded system of nightly peace. In homes, softer rituals unfolded. A parent might rub scented oil onto a child's forehead or hands. Another family member might set out a small offering of bread or herbs near a household shrine, acknowledging the transition from activity to rest. These actions were modest in scale but significant in effect. They helped people release anxiety by reinforcing a predictable pattern. Egyptian homes also emphasized physical comfort. After a long day in the sun, families often washed their feet or hands with cool water. Not only was this practical, given the climate, but it signaled to the body that the day's labor had ended. Linen bedding, lightweight and breathable, helped ease the transition into sleep. Families arranged sleeping spaces carefully, keeping them free of clutter to maintain a sense of order, something they believed supported mental balance. He considered how Egyptians approached sound at night. Unlike early civilizations, who relied entirely on natural noises, Egyptians introduced gentle, controlled sound into their routines. Soft humming, steady breathwork, or the quiet rhythmic tapping of a ceremonial instrument helped ease tension. These sounds were not dramatic. They were simple, familiar, and repetitive, the kind of sounds that shaped reliable relaxation. Nighttime also became a moment for connection. Families spoke about the day in calm tones, recounting events not to analyze them but to release them. Sharing experiences before sleep helped reduce lingering worry. Even households that were strained or tired found comfort in the predictability of these conversations. The overarching theme in Egyptian nighttime practices was structure. Their cooling environment, dim lighting, calming scents, herbal infusions, and quiet rituals all worked together. Nothing was abrupt. Egyptians believed that calm arrived step by step. He imagined a final scene, a small Egyptian home lit by one or two lamps. A cup of chamomile sits near the bedside. The faint smell of lotus and resin hangs in the air. The fire has burned low, leaving only a soft glow. A family settles onto their mats, their breathing slowing as the desert quiet deepens. Outside, the Nile moves steadily, reflecting the stars above. Inside, everything is prepared for a night free of worry. The chapter ended with a gentle reminder that Egyptians did not force relaxation. They created an environment that allowed it to occur naturally, and in doing so, they left behind some of the earliest documented methods for easing the mind at the end of the day. In the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the world moved according to cycles of water, harvest, and sun. This region, known as Mesopotamia, was one of the earliest places where humans formed organized cities. At night, these cities settled into a distinct rhythm. Clay homes cooled, the streets grew quiet, and towering ziggurats stood against the dark sky like silent guardians. It was here that some of the earliest written records of healing and stress relief were created, records that showed how deeply the Mesopotamians valued rest. He pictured a typical evening in a Mesopotamian settlement such as Ur or Babylon. The heat of the day gradually retreated, leaving behind a soft breeze that carried the scent of baked clay and distant river water. Families returned to their homes with baskets of grain, fiber, or goods from the market. Lamps made of terracotta were lit with oil, casting warm, steady light across the walls. Even though the homes were small, the atmosphere at night felt settled and secure. Mesopotamians were among the first people to record their knowledge in writing, using clay tablets pressed with wedge-shaped marks. These tablets contained practical information, laws, trade accounts, but also remedies. Many of those remedies were designed for easing discomfort, improving sleep, or calming anxious thoughts. Unlike earlier civilizations who relied solely on oral tradition, the Mesopotamians left behind descriptions detailed enough to provide insight into their daily routines. One category of remedies discussed in these tablets involved plants and oils. Mesopotamians used calming herbs found along the riverbanks, including mint, thyme, safflower, and saffron. Some herbs were crushed and applied as ointments. Others were boiled to make infusions. Oils scented with herbs were used to soothe the head or chest, easing tension after a long day of work. He imagined a healer, perhaps. An ASE, the term used for a medical practitioner, preparing these remedies in a small corner of a home or workshop. The healer selected ingredients from baskets and jars, using techniques that had been refined through generations. The goal was not simply to treat illness, but to restore balance. Mesopotamians believed that emotional distress could disturb the body, and calming the mind helped restore harmony. One of the most notable remedies involved sleep plants, described in fragments of early medical tablets. These plants were steeped or crushed to release oils believed to encourage deeper rest. Though the tablets did not always provide exact measurements, they emphasized moderation and repeated the importance of preparing the remedy during the quiet hours of the evening. Another aspect of Mesopotamian stress relief came through their belief in spiritual balance. They did not separate physical health from spiritual well-being. If a person struggled with sleeplessness or worry, it was common to attribute the disturbance to imbalance or unseen forces. To restore calm, families used small rituals. A popular method involved placing protective amulets near sleeping areas. These amulets, often made of clay or carved stone, carried symbols of gods or spirits associated with protection and tranquility. He pictured a family placing such an amulet above the doorway or near the head of a sleeping mat. The act offered a sense of comfort, reinforcing safety at night. These items did not rely on magic as much as reassurance. Families believed that by acknowledging forces beyond their control, they could release part of their tension. Mesopotamian priests also contributed to the healing system. Known for their knowledge of chants and incantations, they performed rituals designed to calm individuals during periods of distress. These rituals were not dramatic. They involved steady, repetitive words spoken in low tones, combined with small gestures or symbolic objects. Listening to these rhythms likely helped slow breathing and relax the mind, an early form of guided calmness. Daily life also shaped stress relief. After sunset, families gathered in their courtyards or on flat rooftops. The rooftops, surprisingly, were among the most peaceful places in a Mesopotamian home. Elevated above the noise of the streets, they provided a direct view of the night sky. People often sat there as the air cooled, talking quietly or simply resting. The sight of the stars offered perspective, reminding them of their place within a much larger world. This nightly connection to the sky helped ease the mind after the demands of the day. He considered how important routine was to the Mesopotamian evening. People finished their tasks before dark, kept lamps dim in the late hours, and settled into predictable patterns. This reliability helped reduce anxiety. Even when days were difficult, full of heavy labor or unexpected problems, the night remained steady. Sound also played a role in calming the mind. In some homes, small instruments such as frame drums or stringed lyres were used gently at night, not for entertainment, but to create soft, repetitive notes that soothed the environment. These sounds echoed the rhythm of early rituals and helped families enter a slower mental state. Another calming practice involved the use of warm compresses. Heated stones wrapped in cloth were placed near tense muscles or aching joints. These compresses helped the body release physical stress accumulated from agricultural or manual labor. The warmth encouraged rest, especially during colder nights. Throughout Mesopotamia, water had a strong influence on calmness as well. The rivers shaped their entire civilization, and the sound of flowing water was common near settlements. People often sat near the riverbanks at dusk, using the sound of the current to settle their thoughts. The river became a natural anchor, steady, continuous, and unaffected by human concerns. He imagined a final nightly scene. A family sits on their rooftop, the moon reflected on the distant river. A small lamp burns beside them. The cool air carries the scent of crushed herbs. A protective amulet hangs near the sleeping area. Somewhere below, a healer finishes preparing oils for the next day. And as the city quiets, the towering ziggurat stands with its stepped edges glowing faintly in the moonlight, a silent symbol of connection between earth and sky. In T's world, stress was met not with isolation, but with a blend of practical remedies, shared routines, and spiritual reassurance. The Mesopotamians understood that calming the mind required more than a single action. It required environment, belief, and habit working together. The chapter closed with a thought that these early practices, herbal mixtures, calming scents, protective symbols, and evening routines would influence civilizations that followed. Their records left a foundation for the healing systems of later cultures. By the time ancient Greece entered its classical era, the world had already accumulated countless remedies and small traditions for easing the mind. But the Greeks approached stress and rest in a way that set them apart. They examined the mind directly. They asked questions about emotion, thought, and balance with an attention that would shape much of Western understanding for centuries. While the Egyptians and Mesopotamians offered structure and ritual, the Greeks added reflection, philosophy, and observation. He imagined the Greek landscape, a dusk-leaved trees casting long shadows, stone homes cooling under the evening breeze, and people ending their day in ways that blended routine with contemplation. Greek evenings looked simple on the surface, yet they were threaded with ideas about health, virtue, and inner calm. One of the central figures in this story was Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine. While his name was associated with many medical teachings, his observations about the mind were equally influential. He believed that mental states were deeply connected to physical well-being. If someone struggled with worry or restlessness, Hippocrates saw it not as a flaw in character, but as an imbalance in the body that could be corrected with lifestyle, diet, and environment. This single shift from blaming a person's spirit to understanding their condition changed how people approached mental calm. Greek healers encouraged a slower pace toward the end of the day. They recommended warm baths, mild herbal infusions, and steady breathing. They also advised avoiding heavy food late in the evening, believing that digestion influenced dreams and sleep. Their approach was not mystical, it was practical, and it revealed how much attention they paid to the subtle connection between body and mind. Among the Greeks' calming plants, lavender became one of the most significant. Its scent was valued for easing headaches and softening mental strain. People placed small bundles near their resting areas or used the oils sparingly on their skin. Greek households often filled the evening air with the fragrance of lavender, not for luxury, but because families knew it created an environment that supported rest. Another plant, the poppy, held symbolic meaning as well as practical use. The bright red poppy was associated with hypnos, the personification of sleep. In art and stories, gods who guided humans into slumber were often depicted wearing crowns of poppies or holding clusters of the flowers. The poppy symbolized the transition between wakefulness and rest, reminding people to respect that boundary. While opium derived from poppies existed in the ancient world, its stronger uses were more limited and not part of everyday rest practices. More commonly, the flower served as a symbol of peaceful sleep and the gentle surrender of worry. He imagined a Greek philosopher at the end of a long day, perhaps someone sitting outside a modest stone home, looking out at the fading horizon. Greek thinkers often encouraged reflection as a way to settle the mind. They believed that understanding one's thoughts reduced their power to disturb. Simple questions guided their evenings. What did I learn today? What concerns can wait for tomorrow? What can I release before sleep? This mental practice was not rigid. It simply encouraged awareness, helping thoughts become clearer and less tangled. This reflective habit blended naturally with Greek evening routines. Families shared meals in open courtyards where conversations flowed slowly. Children listened to stories about heroes or the gods. Adults discussed small events or plans, not in anxious tones, but in a measured way that allowed the mind to unwind. The Greeks saw conversation as a tool for balance, a way to prevent emotions from building without release. He also considered the practice of gymnastics, early forms of movement and stretching performed before meals, or in the quiet hours of the evening. While vigorous exercise was more common in the morning, slower forms of movement were used later in the day. These gentle stretches helped ease tension from the body, especially for those who worked physically demanding jobs. By releasing physical strain, the mind became more receptive to rest. Some Greeks turned toward philosophy itself as a form of mental healing. Thinkers such as the Stoics encouraged people to focus on what they could control and release what they could not. This was not meant as a solution to every problem, but as a framework that helped reduce anxiety. If a concern was beyond one's influence, it did not deserve a place in the mind before sleep. If it was within one's influence, it could be addressed in the morning. This mindset allowed the evenings to remain calm. Another important Greek belief involved a natural environment. They saw great value in fresh air, steady breezes, and the open sky. Many Greek homes were built around courtyards, allowing families to experience the night sky directly. The sight of stars, the movement of air, and the soft sounds of nature became part of the nightly environment. This connection to the outdoors supported emotional balance in a way that felt instinctively soothing. He pictured a typical Greek home, preparing for sleep. A warm bath might be taken using water heated earlier in the day. A mixture of herbs, lavender, mint, or rose could be added to create a relaxing scent. Someone might light a small oil lamp. Children settled onto woven mats. Adults finished quiet conversations and began to move more slowly. The rhythm of the home shifted naturally toward rest. Greek healers encouraged consistency. They believed that the body learned from patterns. If a person maintained a steady nightly routine, sleep improved. If they allowed chaos or unpredictability into the home at night, the mind remained unsettled. This early understanding of sleep hygiene demonstrated the Greeks' interest in not only treating symptoms but preventing them. He reflected on how Greek traditions contributed something unique to the wider story of ancient rest. While other civilizations relied heavily on herbs, rituals, and environment, the Greeks added awareness. They asked why the mind struggled and encouraged people to understand the causes of their restlessness. This combination of practical remedies and reflective thought formed a balanced system that still influences how people think about mental health today. As the chapter drew to a close, he imagined the listener transitioning out of the Greek world, the scent of lavender still fresh in the mind, the gentle conversations of the courtyard fading, and the quiet sense of balance lingering. The journey had now passed through early civilizations, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece, and next, it would move toward a culture known for warmth, comfort, and communal relaxation. The Roman world. By the time ancient Rome reached its height, daily life had become more complex than in earlier civilizations. Cities were dense, trade was constant, and work demanded long hours from citizens across all social classes. Yet, despite the intensity of Roman life, the culture developed one of the most effective systems for unwinding. These public spaces were more than places to clean the body. They served as emotional shelters, offering warmth, conversation, and a slow, deliberate path toward relaxation. He imagined a Roman city in the late afternoon. The streets buzzed with activity vendors closing their stalls, workers finishing their tasks, and travelers arriving from distant towns. Amid this movement stood the bath complexes, large structures of stone and brick, their wide entrances glowing with soft lamplight. As the sun lowered, people made their way inside, seeking the comfort that awaited them within. Once someone entered a bathhouse, the outside world faded. Voices softened, the air warmed, and the scent of oils and heated water filled the space. Roman baths followed a specific progression designed to guide the body and mind gradually from tension into stillness. This progression was known to everyone, whether wealthy or modest in status. The first stop was often the appetiterium, the changing room. People removed their clothing, leaving behind not only dust from the day but a symbolic layer of stress. The simple act of changing signaled to the mind that a transition had begun. From here, they moved into the tepidarium, a warm room, gently heated through an underfloor system called the hypo. The warmth seeped into the muscles, encouraging the body to loosen. Conversations here were light, friendly, and slow. He pictured someone sitting quietly on a stone bench in the tepidarium. Warm air filled the lungs with each breath, easing the tension carried from the streets. The person might speak briefly with a friend about daily matters, but never in a hurried way. Nothing in the bathhouse demanded speed. Everything encouraged presence. After warming the body, visitors moved into the caldarium, a hot, steamy room that promoted deep relaxation. The humidity softened tight muscles and made breathing steady and smooth. The heat opened the pores of the skin and allowed the mind to wander gently. People applied oils scented with herbs, rosemary, pine, or myrtle to refresh the senses. Healers sometimes used this space to massage sore limbs or apply light pressure to areas strained by labor. The caldarium was not just a physical space. It was a place where the mind let go of the intensity of the day. In this environment, stress dissolved gradually, the predictable sequence changing. Warming, heating, cooling mirrored natural processes. Nothing was abrupt. Romans understood that the body responded well to gradual shifts, and they built their bathhouses to reflect this understanding. After the caldarium, visitors entered the frigidarium, a cool plunge pool. Though brief, this step finished the ritual. The sudden coolness awakened the senses without causing alarm. It closed the pores, refreshed the skin, and marked the return to a balanced state. Emerging from the water, a person felt physically renewed and mentally clearer than before. Bathhouses also served as social spaces. They were places where friendships strengthened, ideas spread, and daily worries softened through conversation. People discussed news, read advice, and listened to one another's concerns. This communal aspect had a powerful emotional effect. Being surrounded by others who were equally engaged in the ritual reinforced a sense of belonging and calm. He also imagined quieter bathhouses in smaller towns. These were simpler, but shared the same purpose. A small pool, a warm room, and a space for gentle massage were enough to create the familiar rhythm of Roman relaxation. Whether in large cities or rural settings, the bath culture unified communities through shared routines. Outside the bathhouse, Roman homes carried their own nightly rituals. After returning home from the baths, many people enjoyed light meals, simple conversations, or quiet hours near a small oil lamp. The gradual transition from public warmth to private stillness mirrored earlier civilizations, but Rome refined it into an intentional practice. The body was already relaxed from the baths, making sleep easier to achieve. Romans believed strongly in the connection between cleanliness, warmth, and mental clarity. They understood that physical comfort influenced emotional well-being. This belief extended to their use of oils and herbs at night. Olive oil mixed with calming scents like lavender or chamomile was applied to the skin before sleep. These oils not only moisturized, but also offered a familiar fragrance that gently guided the mind toward rest. He reflected on how Romans approached the evening. Their culture was busy and ambitious, yet they built into their day a structured method for letting go. The bath ritual acted as a protective barrier between the demands of work and the quiet of night. Unlike modern routines that sometimes rush from stress to sleep, Romans created a long, slow runway into calmness. He pictured a final scene, a Roman citizen walking home from the bathhouse. As dusk settled over the city, the streets were calmer now, lit by small torches. The lingering warmth from the caldarium still rested in the person's muscles. They returned to a home where the lamps were dim, the air was cool, and the quiet of night began to take hold. After a light meal and a few soft exchanges with family, the person settled into bed, breathing steadily, the mind already preparing for rest. This chapter demonstrated how Rome contributed to the long history of stress relief, not with complex medicines, but with warmth, water, and predictable routine. The bathhouse became a sanctuary where people could temporarily set aside their burdens and rediscover balance. And these customs, rooted in hospitality and care, continued to influence later cultures and modern ideas of relaxation. As the chapter ended, he prepared to guide the listener further east toward one of the oldest systems of holistic living, the world of ancient India, where balance of breath, diet, and routine took shape into a comprehensive approach to inner calm. As the journey moved eastward, the landscape changed. The dry heat of the Mediterranean gave way to the warm, humid air of the Indian subcontinent. Here, among river valleys, forests, and early urban settlements, a different approach to calmness and emotional balance emerged. Ancient India developed one of the most comprehensive systems for understanding stress, rest, and well-being. It was not just a medical tradition, but a philosophy of living that encouraged harmony between body, mind, and environment. He pictured an ancient village along the banks of the Ganges. As evening approached, the heat softened, and the sounds of daily work faded. Farmers washed near the river. Families prepared simple meals, and the air filled with scents of spices, herbs, and damp earth. Life here followed patterns, but these patterns were not only physical, they were woven into beliefs about balance and internal calm. Ayurveda, which means the knowledge of life, was central to this worldview. It taught that every person carried a unique constitution shaped by natural forces, and maintaining balance between those forces led to health and peace. Although the system had layers of complexity, its nightly routines were simple and practical. One of the key principles involved the doshas vata, pitta, and kapha. These were not medical diagnoses, but reflections of natural tendencies in the body and mind. People didn't need deep knowledge of the doshas to benefit from Ayurvedic routines. They simply lived according to rhythms that supported stability. For example, evenings were considered a time for grounding, especially for calming Vata dosha, associated with movement, worry, and mental restlessness. Grounding activities helped the mind slow after a day of activity. Warmth, routine, and gentle sensory experiences all supported this natural transition. He imagined a household preparing for the end of the day. A pot of warm milk simmered on a small stove with pieces of ginger or cardamom floating on top. This drink, simple but beloved, helped settle the stomach and prepare the mind for sleep. Nearby, someone mixed sesame oil or coconut oil in a small bowl, warming it slightly. In Ayurveda, oiling the skin at night, particularly the feet or scalp, was believed to quiet the nervous system. The warmth and scent worked together to reduce tension. Another calming practice involved breath work, known as pranayama. Even without formal instruction, many families practiced slow, steady breathing at night. The idea was straightforward. The breath guided the mind. When breathing slowed, thoughts followed. A simple pattern: inhale, pause, exhale became an anchor that steadied the internal world. Unlike dramatic exercises, these breath techniques were quiet, discreet, and accessible to anyone. Early forms of yoga also developed during this period, though not the physical routines familiar today. Ancient yoga was primarily about stillness, observation, and mental clarity. A person might sit for a few minutes after dinner, legs folded, hands resting on their knees. allowing the mind to settle as the environment grew quieter. This practice, though brief, encouraged awareness without forcing it. He imagined a teacher guiding a small group of villagers in gentle evening routines. The teacher's instructions were calm. Focus on breathing. Relax the shoulders. Stay aware of the sounds around you. The goal was not perfection, but presence. These early teachings became part of daily life, shaping how people approached rest. Herbs played an important role in Indian nighttime routines. Plants such as ashwagandha, brahmi, and tulsi were known for reducing mental tension. Villagers often boiled leaves or roots to make mild infusions. The purpose was not to induce sleep quickly, but to support emotional steadiness. The steady, warm liquid signaled to the body that it was time to shift downward from activity. Incense was equally common. The smoke from sandalwood, jasmine, or neame drifted through homes as a natural part of the evening environment. Incense did more than provide scent. It created a boundary between day and night. Once the incense was lit, the home began to quiet. The fragrance lingered long enough to become associated with rest, making the transition predictable and comforting. Ancient Indian homes also emphasized evening routines that softened the senses. Lamps filled with ghee or sesame oil provided gentle light. Families avoided loud conversation and preferred quiet tasks, such as preparing bedding, massaging tired limbs, or arranging the sleeping area. Children were told simple stories from the Panchatantra, stories about animals that taught moral lessons. These stories served the same purpose as bedtime tales. In other cultures, they helped children and adults release the final tensions of the day. He considered how early Indian culture viewed sleep. Unlike some civilizations that saw sleep as simply a break-in activity, Indians treated it as a vital part of health. Poor sleep was not a moral weakness. It was a sign of imbalance. The solution was not force, but restoration. This perspective encouraged people to care for themselves through routines rather than pressure. Water too played a role in nighttime.com. Many villagers washed their feet before bed, believing that cool water helped regulate temperature and calm the mind. The sensation of clean skin and coolness created a sense of relief after hours of walking and working. This simple act eased both physical and mental restlessness. He pictured the final moments of an ancient Indian evening. The lamps dimmed, incense faded, and the air cooled. A family lay on woven mats, covered with cotton cloths, listening to the natural rhythm of crickets or distant water. Someone finished a cup of warm milk. Another rested after gentle breath work. Children drifted into sleep more easily after hearing familiar stories. The environment itself guided everyone toward rest. What set ancient India apart was not a single ritual or remedy, but the philosophy that connected them. Ayurveda encouraged people to build their evenings intentionally, using warmth, scent, breath, and routine to support the nervous system. These practices were gentle, consistent, and aligned with how the human body naturally relaxed. As the chapter came to a close, he reflected on how this approach contributed to the global story of ancient stress relief. The Indian emphasis on balance, awareness, and sensory grounding offered a model that remained relevant long after its origins. And as the journey continued eastward, even more traditions of internal, calm, and mindful movement awaited. The next stop would be ancient China, where stillness, breath, and moving energy formed another deep understanding of emotional peace. As the journey continued east, the landscape changed once more. Mountains rose in layered silhouettes, rivers wound through valleys, and ancient towns rested along trade routes. In this environment, China developed a unique understanding of emotional balancing, rooted in harmony, controlled movement, and the gentle flow of internal energy. Here, stress was not seen as an isolated problem. It was understood as a disruption in the circulation of qi, the vital life force believed to move through every person. He pictured an ancient Chinese village in the late evening. Workers returned from the fields, merchants closed their stalls, and the final light of the day settled softly on the tiled roofs. Lanterns were lit one by one, their warm glow spreading through narrow pathways. The world quieted in predictable stages, much like the cycles described in early Chinese texts about balance in nature. One of the most distinctive practices in this region was qigong, a combination of slow movements, controlled breath, and mindful attention. Qigong was not intended to be strenuous. Its purpose was to guide energy gently through the body, releasing areas of tension and restoring harmony. People practiced it in small groups or individually, often at sunrise or sunset. In the evenings, the movements became even slower, emphasizing calmness rather than exertion. He imagined a person standing in an open courtyard. As the evening breeze moved through the trees, the person lifted their arms slowly, allowing the shoulders to relax. Each motion followed the breath, encouraging the mind to remain attentive but not strained. These movements helped settle the nervous system, making the transition from daytime activity to nighttime rest smoother and more natural. Chinese culture placed great emphasis on breath. Breath was understood as a direct expression of qi. When breathing became shallow or erratic, it signaled imbalance. When it became steady, the mind responded accordingly. Many families practiced slow breathing exercises before bed, not as a rigid technique but as a natural part of winding down. A simple pattern inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth helped soften internal unrest. Another central idea in ancient China involved the relationship between yin and yang. These were not opposing forces in conflict, but complementary elements that needed to remain in equilibrium. Daylight was yang active, warm, outward. Night was yin cool, quiet, inward. To prepare for sleep, people tried to shift from yang to yin through their evening routines. They dimmed lights, avoided stimulating conversation, and adopted quiet tasks. This gradual movement toward yin made rest more accessible. Herbs also supported this balance. Ancient Chinese texts recorded the use of calming plants, such as jujube seed, schizandra, and chrysanthemum. Some were brewed into teas. Others were placed in small cloth pouches near sleeping areas. These herbs were known to ease tension, support stable breathing, and settle the mind. The process of preparing these teas, warming water, steeping leaves, waiting patiently, was itself part of the calming routine. He pictured a healer, known as a shi, or early physician, preparing a nighttime remedy. The healer handled dried herbs with care, placing them into a clay pot of warm water. As the steam rose, the scent filled the room with a grounding aroma. The patient would drink slowly, allowing each sip to create a sense of internal quiet. These remedies were not meant to act quickly. They worked gradually, respecting the body's natural rhythms. Sound also became a method of easing stress. In many Chinese traditions, evening chants or humming practices were used to stabilize breath and promote calmness. These sounds were subtle and repetitive, serving as anchors for the mind. Temples used wooden fish drums and soft bells at dusk, creating an auditory signal that the active hours had ended. Families living nearby often felt a sense of peace when these sounds echoed through the village. Another important element was environmental stillness. Chinese homes were often designed to support calm through layout and simplicity. Courtyards offered open space, allowing cool air to circulate. Rooms minimized clutter, encouraging an orderly mindset. People believed that outer order reflected and shaped inner order. When the home became calm, the mind followed. Light played an important role as well. Instead of bright flames, families used oil lamps or lanterns, made from thin paper that softened the glow. This gentle lighting encouraged the eyes to relax. The dimness prepared the mind for slower thought, reflecting the shift from yang's brightness to yin's subtlety. Evening meals were deliberately light in many households. Heavy foods were avoided, as they were believed to disrupt the digestive fire and influence dreams. Soups, warm grains, vegetables, and broths were common. Eating lightly made sleep more comfortable, reducing restlessness during the night. Beyond herbs and breathwork, ancient Chinese philosophy also emphasized emotional regulation. Texts such as the Wangdi, Negin described how emotions affected the body. Worry weakened the spleen. Fear disturbed the kidneys. Anger disrupted the liver. Because of this understanding, families addressed emotions calmly in the evening. They spoke of concerns gently, expressed gratitude for the day, and avoided heated discussions. This emotional hygiene was considered necessary for restful sleep. He pictured a family preparing for rest in a peaceful home. The lamps had been dimmed. A tea of chrysanthemum cooled on a wooden table. Someone practiced slow breathing near an open window. A child listened to a story about ancient heroes, tone and a soft tone. Another family member massaged warm oil into their wrists or temples. Outside, The sound of crickets blended with the distant murmur of a river. The environment encouraged stillness without forcing it. As night deepened, the home entered a state of yin. People lay on firm wooden beds or woven mats, covered lightly according to the season. The cool night air moved gently through the courtyard. The mind slowed, guided by the consistency of nightly habits that countless generations had followed. What made ancient China's approach distinctive was its integration of movement, breath, environment, and belief. Calmness was not the result of one action, but a combination of habits sustained over time. By aligning the body with natural cycles and internal rhythms, people created an environment where stress could gradually dissolve. As the chapter came to a close, he reflected on how these practices continued to shape modern ideas of mindfulness, meditation, and slow, intentional movement. Ancient Chinese traditions emphasized balance between effort and rest, light and dark, activity and stillness, and it was this balance that guided them gently into the night. The journey would now shift toward a universal theme found across the world: the calming power of sound. The next chapter would explore how cultures used voice, rhythm, and music to ease the mind long before science understood why it worked. Long before written remedies, measured herbs, or structured philosophies, humans discovered one of the simplest and most universal tools for easing the mind: sound. Whether through voice, instrument, rhythm, or natural patterns, sound shaped the emotional landscape of ancient evenings. Across continents and cultures long before these societies ever met, people instinctively turned to sound to guide their thoughts into stillness. He imagined the earliest communities gathered around fires, not yet part of organized civilizations. These people did not have complex instruments or formal chants. Instead, they used the most natural sound available to them: the human voice. A single humming tone, repeated softly, could steady breathing. A gentle rhythm tapped on a hollow log or stone could focus wandering thoughts. These simple patterns formed the foundation for everything that came later. As civilizations evolved, sound became both an expression of culture and a practical tool for emotional balance. Ancient India refined chanting into rhythmic patterns that helped regulate breath. China used bells, wooden drums, and the steady beat of ceremonial instruments to mark transitions in the day. Egypt incorporated soft singing into temple rituals. Mesopotamia relied on low, repetitive incantations for reassurance. Though separated by distance, each culture recognized the soothing effect of stable sound. He pictured a Buddhist monastery tucked into the mountains of ancient East Asia. As dusk settled, monks gathered in a hall lit only by lanterns. The air was cool, still, and expectant. Then, a single tone from a wooden bell resonated through the space. Moments later, the monks began to chant. Their voices moved in slow, steady waves, neither loud nor forceful. The sound did not aim to impress. It aimed to bring the mind into alignment with the present moment. Even listeners with no formal training felt their breath deepen and their thoughts soften as the tones filled the room. These chants were not intended to lull people into sleep directly, yet they eased the internal tension that often prevented rest. The body relaxed as it followed the predictable cadence. The mind eased as it shifted from scattered thoughts to a single, shared sound. In this way, chanting became an essential part of nightly routines in many monasteries, supporting emotional clarity and stillness. Elsewhere in the world, sound took different forms. Among indigenous tribes in the Americas, drumming served as a means of grounding. The steady beat connected people to the earth and each other. A rhythmic, repetitive drum pattern created a sense of unity and calm, reducing feelings of fear, uncertainty, or restlessness. The drumbeat anchored the listener's awareness, guiding it away from chaotic thoughts and toward internal balance. He imagined a small group gathering near a fire. The drum's rhythm was slow, steady, and unchanging, similar to a heartbeat. Over time, the sound encouraged the mind to release tension. The body felt heavier, more grounded. People who had experienced a difficult day found comfort simply by sitting near the rhythm. The drum did not demand attention. It allowed thoughts to settle naturally. In the Mediterranean, ancient Greek and Roman cultures used stringed instruments to soothe the mind. Instruments such as the lyre and the harp produced soft, resonant tones that filled homes, courtyards, and small gatherings. Musicians often played in the evening after daily work had ended. Their melodies were simple, created not for performance, but for companionship. He pictured a Greek home in the evening, with a small fire burning in the center of a courtyard. Someone plucked the strings of a lyre, each note falling into the quiet, like a gentle pebble into still water. The sound brought a sense of closure to the day. Children listened while drifting into sleep. Adults found their worries lightened by the familiar tones. In ancient Egypt, flutes made from reeds produced calming, breathy melodies. Their sound carried easily across water, blending with the natural rhythm of the Nile. People used these instruments during religious rituals, funerals, and daily transitions, recognizing their ability to guide emotion. Flutes were not loud or sharp. They encouraged listeners to slow down and breathe more deeply. China's tradition of sound extended beyond chants. The guqin, a 7-stringed instrument, was played slowly and thoughtfully. Scholars believed its tones reflected the moral character of the player. The quiet plucking of its strings created a meditative atmosphere that supported reflection. In the evenings, guqin music accompanied study, discussion, or simple rest, deepening the sense of calm. Sound was not always made intentionally. Nature itself provided its own form of emotional grounding. The rustle of bamboo, the movement of water, or the soft calls of insects shaped the auditory backdrop of the ancient world. People heard these sounds daily, and over generations, they became part of the instinctive vocabulary of calm. He imagined a person standing outside their home in any of these ancient cultures. Perhaps it was an Egyptian farmer listening to the river, or a Chinese scholar hearing wind through leaves, or a Greek shepherd resting near grazing animals. These natural sounds were illibly changed by politics, weather, or personal worry. They reminded people of continuity, which reduced the pressure of whatever weighed heavily on their minds. Across cultures, sound also served as a way to mark time. Bells, drums, horns, and chants indicated the end of work, the beginning of rest, or the approach of night. These signals helped families shift their internal pace, preparing them for calmer hours. Without needing to think about it, people responded to these cues, allowing their bodies to settle more quickly. What made sound so effective was its ability to shape the mind without requiring effort. Unlike complex rituals, sound did not need interpretation or skill. A listener did not need to understand the words of a chant or the meaning of a melody to experience its calming effect. Sound worked through rhythm, repetition, and presence elements that transcended time and geography. The chapter drew to a close with a universal truth. Long before science explored brain waves or nervous system responses, ancient people intuitively understood the power of sound. They knew that steady rhythms eased tension, that soft tones encouraged rest, and that shared songs strengthened community. Sound helped unify the body, the mind, and the environment into a single, peaceful experience. And as night deepened across their many worlds, from temples and mountains to deserts and forests, these ancient sounds carried people gently toward rest. Next, the journey would widen its focus once more, exploring how families across cultures used nightly routines to prepare their homes and minds for sleep. Across every ancient civilization, no matter the region, climate, or culture, nightfall brought a natural shift in rhythm. Work slowed, voices softened, and homes became places of transition from activity to rest. While each culture developed its own remedies, philosophies, and rituals, the nightly routines inside typical homes shared a surprising number of similarities. These routines were not elaborate. They formed naturally through habit, shaped by environment and necessity, and together, they created a universal pattern of settling the mind at the end of the day. He imagined a simple home made of clay, wood, or stone, depending on the region, standing quietly at dusk. The exterior softened as the last light faded. Inside, families prepared for the evening using familiar steps repeated across generations. These steps created predictability, and predictability calmed the mind long before people understood the science behind it. One of the first actions was always light management. In a world without electricity, households relied on fire, lamps, candles, or glowing embers. The shift from sunlight to lamplight happened gradually. A fire burned lower, oil lamps flickered gently, and shadows deepened on the walls. This natural dimming told the human brain it was time to settle. No one needed alarms, instructions, or reminders. The environment itself encouraged rest. Families then began an evening cleanup. They swept the floors, rolled up tools, out on dead mats, and cleared eating areas. This wasn't a conscious attempt at mental hygiene. It was practical, but in clearing the physical space, people inadvertently cleared mental space as well. A tidy room meant fewer anxieties and fewer reminders of unfinished tasks. The simple act of putting things in order helped the mind shift from work to peace. Evening meals played a major role in night rituals. Unlike modern rushed dinners, ancient meals were often slow and communal. Families gathered around small tables or sat on the floor, sharing bowls of cooked grains, soups, vegetables, or bread. This time created a sense of togetherness. The meals were rarely heavy at night, as many cultures learned through experience that lighter foods made sleep easier. The shared eating also provided emotional grounding. Stories of the day were exchanged calmly. Children asked small questions. Adults responded in measured tones. This routine allowed worries to fade naturally through conversation. After meals, washing routines followed. In Egypt, India, Greece, and countless smaller communities, people washed their hands and faces before bed. In warmer climates, they washed their feet as well. This served both hygiene and emotional reset. Cool or warm water on the skin helped release bodily tension built up over the day. It signaled to the nervous system that the day's activities were finished. He imagined a quiet home in Mesopotamia or China, where someone filled a small clay bowl with warm water and used a cloth to wash a child's face. The child relaxed under the familiar touch. A parent's gentle movements became an unspoken reminder that safety and care surrounded them. These small gestures supported emotional stability without any formal instruction. Another universal ritual involved managing temperature. In cold regions, families gathered near hearths, wrapping themselves in furs or thick cloth. Heated stones were placed into bedding to create warmth. In hot climates, mats were placed near open doorways, rooftops, or shaded courtyards to catch cool breezes. Temperature comfort played a major role in reducing nighttime stress. Long before anyone connected physical discomfort to restless sleep, many ancient homes used scent to create a nighttime atmosphere. Herbs were hung in doorways or burned in small amounts. Lavender, sage, mint, lemongrass, sandalwood, and frankincense were common, depending on geography. These scents were not chosen for luxury. Families noticed that certain smells signaled calm, and they began to associate those smells with rest. Over time, scent became a powerful nightly cue for the mind. He pictured a home in ancient India, where someone lit a small stick of incense. As the sky darkened, the smoke drifted steadily across the room, marking the shift into quiet hours. In China, sandalwood burned slowly, creating a grounding aroma. In Greece, rosemary or bay leaves released calming fragrance when warmed near the hearth. In Egypt, myrrh and lotus scented the air. Each region used what it had, but the intention remained the same. Night rituals also included conversation and storytelling. These moments were not for entertainment alone. They helped families regulate emotion. A child frightened by the events of the day could find comfort in a parent's steady voice. Adults who carried stress could release tension by sharing their thoughts. Stories, whether about real events, moral lessons, or simple tales, acted as a bridge between wakefulness and rest. In many cultures, people also practiced moments of silence. This wasn't formal meditation, at least not intentionally. It was simply the quiet that settled after chores were done and the home grew dim. Adults paused to reflect on the day, often sitting near a fire or looking out into the night. These moments allowed thoughts to settle naturally. No pressure, no techniques, just quiet. Another universal ritual was checking the home. Doors were secured. Animals were tied or brought inside. Fires were lowered or safely contained. These actions provided a sense of safety, reducing nighttime anxiety. When the environment felt protected, the mind relaxed. He imagined a final nightly scene. A family lying on woven mats or straw bedding. A parent adjusts a blanket. A child curls closer to warmth. Someone in the home blows gently on a lamp to dim it further. Outside, Insects hum, water flows, or wind whispers through trees depending on the region. Inside, the home has grown still. Routines have done their work. The mind settles simply because everything around it has settled. What made these ancient night rituals so effective was not complexity, but consistency. People repeated these routines every day, reinforcing predictable transitions. The human mind responded to this repetition with trust. Trust made it easier to release worries and drift into rest. As the chapter reached its end, the connection became clear, whether in an Egyptian home near the Nile, a Roman home near a warm hearth, or a Chinese courtyard lit by lanterns. Humans eased into night using simple patterns that supported emotional and physical calm. These small habits were the glue that held ancient evenings together. With this foundation in place, the journey could now move toward reflection, examining what lasting lessons these ancient practices offer to the modern world. As the long journey through ancient civilizations reached its final stretch, a clear pattern emerged. Though these cultures differed in language, geography, and belief, they shared an understanding that the mind needed guidance to move from activity into rest. Each civilization developed its own version of calm. Egyptians used herbs and scent. Mesopotamians relied on ritual and protective symbols. Greeks turned to reflection and gentle philosophy. Romans created warmth and communal comfort. Indians emphasized breath and balance, and Chinese traditions focused on stillness and energy flow. He reflected on these worlds as though he were seeing them from above, scoozens of years of human experience unfolding across deserts, forests, rivers, and mountains. Despite their differences, these civilizations left behind lessons that endured because they addressed something constant: the human need for peace. One of the most universal lessons was the idea that nature itself is a healer. For early humans, nature was not something separate from daily life. It shaped the rhythms of existence. Firelight calmed the eyes. The sound of water eased the mind. Herbs offered comfort. Cool evening air helped release the tensions of the day. There was no need to force a sense of calm. Nature provided cues that guided people into rest. He imagined the soft glow of desert lamps, the steady current of the Nile, the rustle of bamboo in China, the hum of insects in India, and the drumbeat of indigenous cultures in the Americas. These natural elements aligned with the body's internal clock, helping people unwind without effort. The modern world often tries to recreate these sensations artificially, yet the principle remains the same. Humans rest best when connected to the environment. Another enduring lesson involved breath. Ancient India developed pranayama, while China refined slow, controlled breathing through qigong. Even in societies without formal breathing practices, people instinctively slowed their breath at night. The body understood that deep, steady breathing signaled safety. This natural pattern appeared in chanting, humming, storytelling, and song across cultures. Breath acted as a bridge between the physical and emotional worlds. He considered how often modern individuals overlooked this simple tool. The ancient world understood it intuitively. When breath steadied, the mind followed. A third timeless principle was the importance of community and connection. In ancient homes, people rarely ended their day alone. They sat together for meals, shared stories, and reflected on their experiences. This social closeness created emotional stability. A parent soothing a child, friends talking near a fire, neighbors sharing quiet moments. These interactions helped release tension. Even the Roman baths, though grander in scale, served the same purpose. They reminded individuals they were part of a greater whole. He imagined how much easier rest became when people felt supported. Modern life sometimes isolates individuals, but the ancient world emphasized that calmness was a shared experience. Another lesson came from the role of predictable routines. Regardless of culture, ancient evenings followed familiar patterns. Lamps were lit at the same time each night. Meals were eaten at similar hours. Homes were prepared consistently for sleep. This repetition created a sense of safety and reliability. The mind, recognizing the pattern, relaxed more easily. Ancient people did not analyze these routines. They lived them. Yet their nightly habits formed the earliest versions of what is now understood as sleep hygiene. The framework was simple, but its impact was profound. Many civilizations taught the value of slowness. There was no immediate leap from hard work to sleep. Instead, there was a gradual descent: warm baths, light conversations, slow movements, gently sense, and quiet time. This slope into rest protected the mind from carrying the intensity of the day into the night. He reflected on how modern life often disrupts this slope. People switch rapidly between tasks, screens, and responsibilities, leaving the mind little time to unwind. The ancient world showed a different path. Calm is not a sudden state, but a gradual one. Another enduring idea involved ritual not in the religious sense, but in the everyday sense. A ritual might be lighting incense, washing one's hands, dimming a lamp, or offering thanks for the day. These acts were small, yet meaningful. They marked the transition into rest, allowing individuals to let go of the day's pressures. Rituals gave structure to the evening and grounded the mind. Across civilizations, people also recognized the importance of simplicity. They did not rely on elaborate methods to release stress. Instead, they used what was available: warmth, breath, sound, herbs, companionship, and routine. This simplicity made the practices accessible to everyone, regardless of status or wealth. He imagined how these lessons remained relevant. In modern times, people sometimes complicated their search for peace, overlooking the effectiveness of simple habits repeated consistently. A final lesson that endured across cultures was the belief that rest is essential, not optional. Ancient people understood that a tired mind could not solve problems, guide communities, or care for families. Rest supported survival. It supported clarity. It supported emotional stability. Many civilizations respected sleep as a natural part of life that deserved protection, preparation, and attention. He pictured the listener absorbing these lessons, not through instruction but through reflection. Nature, breath, community, routine, slowness, ritual, and simplicity, these were the quiet constants that shaped human calmness across thousands of years. They were not inventions. They were discoveries made repeatedly by different cultures because they reflected how the human body works. The chapter drew toward its ending with a gentle understanding. While modern tools and technology have changed, the human need for these simple foundations remains unchanged. The ancient world holds wisdom not because it was perfect, but because it understood something timeless. And with these lessons gathered, the journey approached its final step. After traveling through the past and exploring the quiet traditions of civilizations long gone, it was time to return to the present, bringing these ancient insights with gentle awareness. As the journey through ancient worlds drew to a close, he imagined the listener slowly returning from centuries of wisdom. The Nile faded, the Roman baths cooled, the chants from distant temples softened, and the quiet rhythms of early civilizations dissolved gently into the background. The world of the past stepped aside, leaving the listener once again in the present. Yet something was different now, something quieter, steadier, and more aware. Throughout the journey, each civilization revealed small truths about calmness. Some offered warmth, some offered sound, some offered breath, and others offered slow, grounding routines. The listener had gathered these pieces, not as rigid instructions, but as gentle reminders of how human beings have always found peace. Now, standing at the edge between past and present, it was time to consider how these ancient practices could fit into modern life. He imagined someone at the end of a long day, sitting in a quiet room as night approached. The world outside was still busy as screens glowed. Cars passed on the street, and tasks waited for attention. But the listener now carried the memory of ancient evenings. A Roman easing into warm water, a Greek reflecting on the day in Indian, family breathing slowly under lamplight, a Chinese household dimming lanterns, or a Mesopotamian home arranging protective symbols near a doorway. Even though thousands of years separated those moments from the present, the underlying needs were the same. The body still responded to warm light. The mind still softened with breath, and emotions still settled through routine. The human brain had not changed nearly as much as the world around it, and this realization offered a simple invitation to create, even in a modern environment, a small space where ancient calmness could take root. He reflected on the first universal principle, the role of environment. Ancient homes dimmed the light gradually, used natural sounds, and allowed the evening to unfold slowly. In the present, someone might choose to turn down bright lights earlier, use softer lamps, or create a more quiet space as night approaches. These small changes, rooted in ancient behavior, can signal to the brain that rest is coming. Next came breath, one of the most powerful tools carried across history. In ancient India and China, steady breath guided the mind. The same principle remains true today. A few slow breaths, taken intentionally before bed, can release tension just as effectively now as it did thousands of years ago. No equipment is needed. No deep study is required. The breath itself becomes a reminder of the body's natural rhythm. He considered how sound could also play a role. The ancient world relied on soft chanting, gentle instruments, and comforting rhythms. In the present, someone might listen to calming tones, hum quietly, or sit near natural sounds, like flowing water or gentle wind. The mind responds to sound instinctively, recognizing patterns that encourage relaxation. Another timeless insight came from routine. Ancient families followed predictable patterns each night, cleaning the home, sharing meals, preparing sleeping spaces, lowering lamps. These actions created a sense of safety. Today, routines remain powerful. A consistent nightly pattern can help the mind move from activity to stillness, reducing the chaos that often comes from sudden transitions. He imagined the listener taking inspiration from these rituals without feeling pressure to replicate them exactly. The goal was not to live like an ancient Egyptian or Greek. It was to remember that the mind benefits from steady cues, light, temperature.com voices, gentle scents, and small acts of preparation. Another connection between ancient and modern worlds was reflection. Greek philosophers encouraged examining one's thoughts at the end of the day, not with judgment, but with curiosity. This reflection helped clear mental clutter. In modern life, this might take the form of writing a few sentences in a journal, thinking quietly about the day, or acknowledging worries without letting them expand. He also considered the value of simplicity. Ancient practices were humble because they had to be. People used what they had: herbs, firelight, warm water, breath, song, stillness. These simple elements shaped powerful routines that guided them into rest. In a time filled with complex tools and fast-moving information, simplicity remains profoundly effective. The listener might light a candle or dim a lamp. They might sit quietly for a moment and breathe. They might sip a warm drink, straighten their sleeping area, or listen to a soft sound. These actions require little time, yet they carry the memory of ancient wisdom. They remind the body that night is a moment for recovery, not another stage of productivity. He imagined the listener now settling into the present moment with a clearer sense of how rest can be invited, not forced. The ancient world did not treat relaxation as a skill to be mastered. It emerged from environment, rhythm, and human connection. The listener, having traveled through centuries of gentle guidance, now carried the same understanding. As night deepened, he pictured the listener lying comfortably, perhaps already feeling their breath slow and their thoughts lighten. They had walked through early homes warmed by fire, through Egyptian courtyards scented with herbs, through Mesopotamian rooftops where amulets guarded the night, through Greek courtyards filled with quiet philosophy, through Roman baths of gentle heat, and through Asian landscapes shaped by breath and balance. These memories were not meant to overwhelm. They were meant to remind. Humans have always known how to find peace once they allow themselves to seek it. In the final moments of the chapter, he imagined offering a gentle reassurance. The journey was complete. The ancient world had shared its lessons. Now the listener could rest, knowing that countless generations before them had followed the same nightly descent into calm. He pictured the environment becoming quieter, lights dimming, thoughts slowing, the body growing heavier, and the breath becoming steady. Everything moved naturally toward rest, just as it had across centuries. The story ended with an invitation to let the mind drift, carrying forward the ease gathered along the way. And as the last word settled, he imagined the soothing music beginning steady and welcoming the listener into deeper peace. And so, our journey through ancient remedies and timeless calming traditions gently comes to a close. Across Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, India, China, and countless quiet homes, we followed the soft footsteps of those who lived before us. People who found peace in simple nightly rituals, gentle sounds, warm light, and familiar routines. Their world may be gone, but their wisdom remains close. As you settle deeper into rest, remember, Your mind is allowed to slow. Your body is allowed to soften, and you are allowed to let the day go. Thank you for joining this peaceful journey. If you enjoyed our time together, feel free to subscribe, like, or leave a kind comment. It truly helps the channel continue bringing you these calming stories. For now, rest easy. The spoken story ends here, and the relaxing music begins.